From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters. Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Thank you. We're going to start tonight or this afternoon with a report on actions taken in closed session, and I'm going to give that report. Usually I turn to County Council, but we have an appointment to report. While meeting in closed session on item 41 of this morning's agenda, the Board of Supervisors accepted the resignation of our Director of Airports, Mark Whitsoe. The board would like to thank Mr. Whitsoe for his valuable service over the last 3.5 years and his many accomplishments. We wish Mr. Whitsoe continued success. In a 4-0 vote, the board approved the appointment of Ron Brewster as the interim Director of Airports effective immediately. Mr. Brewster has over 16 years of experience with Kern County Airports and has served as the Chief Operations Officer since 2010. And next on our agenda is our consent agenda. And all the items listed with a CA above the item are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the audience wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. As a member of the board, a member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda and will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board considering the item before action is taken. And so I'm going to read the consent agenda now. And if you would like to follow along, I believe we still have agendas in the back. I can see what we do. So starting on page 2, items 3 through 6 are on consent. And on page 3, items 7 through 12 are on consent. On page 4, all items 13 through 19 are on consent. On page 5, items 20 through 24 are on consent. And on page 6, all items 25 through 31 are on consent. However, item 26 has been withdrawn by the department. And on page 7, items 32 through 38 are all on consent. And so I'll ask if there are any members in our audience tonight that would like to make any comments on the consent agenda. I know, sorry. Okay, seeing none, I'll return to the board.
Motion on consent.
Second.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. 4 ayes, 1 absent. Supervisor Peters.
Okay, this takes us back to item 1 on our agenda on page 2. This is public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not under this agenda but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. And so I'll ask if there are any members of the public that would like to make a public presentation. And speakers are once again limited to 2 minutes, and we'd ask that you state your name before making your presentation. Please come forward. Thanks, I caught myself doing that. I think I thought I was in LAFCO.
Do you want to pass these out? Yes. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Supervisors. I'm Mary Little, a voice for advocacy. I'm here to talk to you again about your lack of leadership and communication with me and my proactive stance for protection against tyranny in Kern County. I again sent a no vaccine passport resolution to you all, And I also asked for a meeting with Supervisor Schneibner with no response. Do you all know the dangers of the jab that's not even called a vaccine by the CDC? Do you know how many millions have died or how many serious injuries there are, especially in children? There's been a 300% spike in miscarriages, 300% increase in cancer, 1,000% increase in neurological issues, 291% increase in heart problems, 156 increase in congenital malformations, 471 increase in female infertility, 467 increase in pulmonary embolism. By not taking a stand, you are in fact saying that you will not allow this, you allow this harm to continue. In essence, are you willing to take responsibility for the people who will suffer because you do not want to take a stand? I'm here fighting for you and your families, and you won't even look at me. Do you want your children subjected to tyranny, discrimination, and government intrusion? I'm sure you don't. Please stop ignoring me. You have a responsibility to represent us. There are venues in Kern County that already mandate the entrance if only allowed to have tested or be jabbed. What about natural immunity? You don't even seem to take that into account. Why is that? Not to mention that atrocities that our children are subjected to in our schools by being sent home, segregated, and discriminated against. The board oversees the public health director and officer. It also has a purview to oversee the local COVID emergence in our county. Your governance matters. You work for the people and swore an oath to protect us from all enemies, foreign and domestic. A few seats will be up for election soon. I know some of the candidates running. They have pledged to support such a resolution. Therefore, in closing, James 5:12 says, "But above all, brethren, do not swear either by heaven or earth or by any oath. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation." Do you want to fall under condemnation? I hope you don't. I would love to see you stand and at least talk to me sometime. Otherwise, I'll be back again.
Who will be next, please?
Hello, my name is Wayne Wong, and I have something short but very important to share with you. This is from the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verse 2. You will not follow a majority for evil, and you will not testify concerning a legal dispute to turn aside after majority to pervert justice. What that means is that if you're in a position to do so, you should make your decisions based on what is right, what is just. And that doesn't depend on what the governor says or doesn't say. If we are in a position of authority, our responsibility is to assess the situation, do the research, and do what is right. So, what Mary has said is, engage. We're asking you to engage, and I'm decreeing and declaring this over you as the board and authority that this be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Dennis McLean. Good afternoon, supervisors. I stand here in support of Mary Little's effort to end these mask and vaccine mandates in Kern County. I'd like you to take a look at this photograph. If you've seen it in the newspaper, y'all. This is a nice, color photograph of our governor. This exposes the hypocrisy and corruption of his administration. Why would this board rubber stamp this clown's policies? Can you guys answer that for me? We have spoken for months against these unconstitutional mandates and have not heard one single word from any of you. I am requesting transparency from this board. You are all representing citizens in your district, and they want to know your position on these mandates. I don't think that's too much to ask. You 5 supervisors have the power to end this hideous and vile attempt to suppress American citizens. I have one disturbing closing comment. While you supervisors sit up on that podium with free choice to mask up or not, my grandchildren are forced to mask up while trying to get a normal education. Total hypocrisy.
Thank you. Who'll be next, please?
Before we go to that, could I make a, Mr. Alsop, do you anticipate that the referrals that I made this morning on the 2 Senate bills will be back next week, a week from today?
We're going to attempt to do that through the chair, Supervisor Couch.
Okay, I would just invite the last 3 speakers to, if we do bring them back, will they be back in the morning or the afternoon session?
Probably the morning, afternoon. Yeah. Okay, we'll go with the PM, if that's, clarity's better right now for you.
They're here. The reason I'm asking is the speakers that came here today are here in the afternoon. They didn't hear what we talked about the referral this morning, and I'm assuming it's easier for them to be here in the afternoon because they're here in the afternoon today. So can I just request that they be in the afternoon session?
That's fine with us.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Supervisor Callis, Supervisor Perez, Supervisor Scribner, and Supervisor Maggart. Thank you for allowing me this time to address some issues. I am Vince Mayoko. I'm the founding president of the Greater Bakersfield Republican Assembly, which is the largest charter of the California Republican Assembly. And I'm also creating a new charter in Taft, which will soon be called the Taft Republican Assembly. I have some serious concerns regarding the Kern County election process from what I have witnessed firsthand. I volunteered during the recall election to work with the Election Integrity Project of California this past fall during the Newsom recall. I worked 2 days in the Kern County election office, and on game day, visited 10 different polling sites in Southwest Bakersfield, Taft, Maricopa, and Buttonwillow. While volunteering at the Kern County election office, I was told by a person working in that office that over 20,000 returned ballots and envelopes were sent back to the election office within 7 days after they were sent out. Okay, and there were also some numerous complaints from fellow Election Integrity Project workers that regarding signature verification, how signatures of the envelopes were coming through not matching the signature on the computer screen. Some of those envelopes left blank, and some of those envelopes, instead of signature, just printed, and those were all passed through and obviously counted in the election. No red flags were issued in regard to any of those. Once I visited different polling sites, one specific site, the Ford City election site where I went, I looked at the voter roll, and I also coach at Taft College, and I was able to count over 250 of my former student athletes that were still on the voter roll, that no longer live in Kern County, and most of them don't even live in the state of California. So there's some serious issues with what's going on in our election office and what's happening regarding our voter rolls. Essentially, if you look at that in itself, think about not just Taft College, but Cal State University Bakersfield students, Bakersfield College students, Saracoso students that are probably on the roll sheets as well too. My solution is this. Kern County Board of Supervisors, everyone here, we need to split up the auditor, controller, county clerk position. To my knowledge, we're the only county in the entire state of California that has those 3 positions headed up by 1 person. We need to create, just for the assurance that our Kern County citizens and taxpayers have the idea that it's a free and fair election. We
Mr.
need to
Mayoko,
split that up, and if we can create a position for that, that would be awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished supervisors. Thank you for giving me this time to speak with you. Essentially, I just want to share with you my story.
Could you please state your name, sir?
I'm sorry, I was getting to that. My name is Greg Perrone, and I just want to share with you my story. It's on a topic we're very familiar with, election integrity. Now, I know people are going to roll their eyes and say, oh, here we go again. I'm not here to accuse anyone of cheating. I'm not here to accuse anybody of anything, but I want you to consider this: incompetence. I'm a household of 2 people. Can somebody please tell me why I had 5 ballots mailed to my house when my youngest child moved 7 years ago? Is that effective stewardship of our election process, or is that incompetence? At my polling place, I've been voting for 20+ years. My address was not listed to facilitate voting. I went in, surrendered my ballot, they looked at the address and said, oh, sir, we cannot help you. Not, you're at the wrong table or try a different place. Is that a lack of training, a lack of caring, or is that incompetence? There was a gentleman in front of me tried to surrender his ballot. It didn't have his name on it. That's the ballot that the post office decided that belonged to him. They treated him like he was cheating the system. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to use the word cheat. Was that an oversight by the post office, or was that incompetence? The poll worker where I showed up had a satanic t-shirt on, a ginormous pentagram with 666 on the points. Now I ask you, what if somebody were to be showing up working with a Let's Go Brandon t-shirt? Would that be acceptable? So is this an acceptable use, acceptable training, or is this just an oversight, or is this incompetence? I'm just one person. I wonder how many other people in Kern County have experienced this very same level of service. So finally, I just want to leave you with this. How many excuses are you willing to accept for this level of service? And how many excuses should we, the people, the voters, accept? I believe it's past time to remove and separate the duties of the county clerk and the registrar of voters from the auditor and controller positions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Who'll be next, please? Good afternoon.
Hi, Paul Infesti. I'm a resident in District 3. This problem has been solved by the county, but I just wanted to point it out. I think it's an important thing to look into and be more transparent about how it happened in the first place, because some people might start getting these ideas about irregularities in the voter department based on what they put out on their own website. And for a couple of months, and I finally got a hold of Mary Bedard to correct it, and she did, but we need to make sure these mistakes don't happen on websites that are put out by the district. But I was stunned when I went on to see what the current voter registration numbers were in Kern County. And it showed that there were 1.3 million Kern County residents that were currently on the voter registration for Kern County. Then it wasn't just a typo there. Bakersfield is a population today of 403,000, the city of Bakersfield. And yet 625,000 were shown as how many people were registered in the city of Bakersfield. And they even had it broken down by the different parties, all of the parties, and also the actual wards. And these numbers were outrageously high. I knew there had to be something to do about it, about what was wrong, and but it did take them a little while to fix it. But I'm curious at how all those numbers could have been so off in the first place. So I just said that, I just want to say that I'm sure there was some sort of a mistake or some sort of input that, that gave these outrageous numbers. They're now back to numbers that I know are pretty, no one else is wearing one. I'm going to take this off. It keeps slipping off my nose. Anyway, these are, as I say, I don't think there's any sort of vast conspiracy of pumping up these ballots, but I just want to, hopefully people need to pay attention as to what information's actually on the websites that are actually put out by the County of Kern, because some people might take that and think this is proof that there's something cheap. Oh, yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Supervisor Perez, did you want to make comments?
Chairman, thank you. Paul, thank you for bringing that to our attention, really. I listened to the gentleman talk about his daughter still registered there, and for any of us who walk precincts, we know if you go to any given house, there could still be people registered there from decades before that they never re-registered at a new place, or in the instance of a child, they, usually under the law, your primary residence remains your domicile, which is where you remain registered, the place you have the greatest intent to return to. I mean, it's very complicated. If people do not re-register at their college location or wherever it is that young people go away to and do, many remain registered at their parents' address because they don't re-register at the new place, so they just sort of stay on the rolls. I'm curious, Paul, I don't know if this is the right time for it, but I would certainly like to see Mary Bedard come in here and address these issues of real confusion, I think.
I will say they did drop the numbers significantly down to about a third of what they were before.
I was just curious if the numbers, registered high doesn't bother me as much as voting high. Voting more than the numbers that are actually here is obviously problematic. But the registration numbers, you can understand there's some wiggle room there because people move and they don't re-register. And so they remain at their domicile under the law. But certainly that gives, I'm not an expert, and that gives confusion, and I think it warrants some clearing up, certainly. I don't see anything wrong with that. But I appreciate, Paul, you coming down here and giving us some insight into the gentleman who spoke about his child and or other people that are registered as house. I've seen that a lot, obviously. You go to a place, people are deceased, they can still be on the rolls. They can't vote, or they shouldn't be voting. That's another issue, obviously. And I personally have never seen anything like that in Kern County. I have profound respect for our elections division. But these are matters that are being raised and that are important and I think deserve conversation. So anyway, thank you guys. Thank you, Chairman.
Supervisor Maggard?
Mr. Linfesti, may I ask you a question, sir? Sure. Do you mind coming back to the microphone? Okay. Thank you. Did you say that you asked Ms. Bedard about why those numbers were so high?
I didn't ask her specifically why they were so high, but she said, she did say in the return email, thank you for pointing out our mistake. I'll give it to our data people to change it. And sure enough, the numbers went back to what I was familiar with for this area,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh.
Did she indicate to you what that mistake was?
No, she did not.
Okay.
She said, just thanks for bringing it to our attention. I will have the data, IT or data, I don't remember what they call it here, to rectify it. And a week later, the numbers were all changed and they were way down, like Bakersfield registration from 625 down to about 200-something thousand. And Kern County fell way down to, which would be normal levels. The thing that really struck me, I understand what Letitia says. She knows that I've been out there walking precincts and I come across those lists all the time. But when they say what voter registration turnout is, like 50% or something, those numbers they give for what that 50% is still a lot less than that 1,300,000 would be. So it's not so much that I know that they're wrong. All of a sudden these numbers zipped up radically high from what they were. Because I know we didn't go from, I know we didn't go from, like in Bakersfield, from 200,000 registered voters that we were working with or in that vicinity to all of a sudden we got enough to make 625,000 in a year. So that was what caught my eye. It was just a real eye-opener for me. So I knew it had to have been some mistake. And sure enough, it was rectified. It's just to be interesting how that there was no, in other words, I guess I'm taking up too much time. I think, in my opinion, there just needs to be some, I've run into this with the city of Bakersfield's website too. There needs to be some sort of oversight of checkers to make sure the information that the county itself is putting out is accurate. Yeah.
Last question, Mr. Linfesti. Where did you look on the county's website?
It's on kernvote.com, and I actually bookmarked it, but you can just type in voter registration details. I took photo shots of the Bakersfield section when it was still wrong.
Okay.
But as I said, it's been corrected to numbers that sound realistic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Linfesti.
Okay,
appreciate that. I do think it's worthwhile to have Ms. Bedard ask her to come down and chat with us about this. And to Mr. Miyoko and Mr. Perrone, it would be helpful probably when we speak of this next, we would ask, I think we can ask her to come next week when we meet, in the afternoon session. So it might be good for you to come, when you come back, give us a little bit, I know there isn't much time for this, but give us briefly why you think it would be a better system if the registrar of voters was separate from the auditor controller. Instead of just asking us to separate them, give us some reason as to why, what your justification would be to that. I'd appreciate that when next we speak. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Alsop, could you formally ask Ms. Bedard to come to our PM session next week and we could entertain that? I'm not looking to set up a big debate. I'm not looking to put her in a position where she's attacked, but it's reasonable. These gentlemen are not attacking anyone. They're just asking questions, so I think that's reasonable to do. Thank you.
I wish I had the same courtesy.
Supervisor Couch? I'm sorry, yeah, Supervisor Couch.
You know, that's a good idea. I was actually going to suggest that before something else, but I can wait for that. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No problem.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Board of Supervisors, for listening to our concerns about election integrity. My name is Lynn Wyman, and I live in the 2nd District, and I'm the president of the Greater Tehachapi Republican Assembly. In the 2020 election, I was asked to fill in a last minute for a poll worker that was unable to work at the polling place in Tehachapi, so I had a little training. These are concerns of the elections in 2020 and the governor recall election in 2021. These are incidents witnessed by poll workers, voters, and my polling place supervisor and myself. Voters that came to the polls to surrender their ballots to vote in person was given a provisional ballot. It was my understanding that they would be able to vote in person and place their ballot in the ballot box. But these voters that were registered to vote, that we actually marked them off, their ballots, they actually were given not a new ballot, but a provisional ballot, and they were placed in a provisional pile. So, and we know how the provisional ballots are counted way later than the actual day of voting ballots are counted. Field representatives were watched ripping Trump flags off of vehicles and forcing voters to remove bumper stickers from their cars. Those vehicles were clearly more than 100 feet from the polling place. No violation of any electioneering laws were broken. In fact, those vehicles were behind the building. It was a church in Tehachapi, so it really wasn't, it was clearly 100 feet from the polling place. A supervisor never showed up to their precinct on election day. Workers tried to get help from the registrar of voters, but they were consistently disconnected. So those voters from that precinct were directed to vote at a different precinct or was not able to vote at all. Poll workers were mistreated by an election official on several different occasions at 2 sites. His unprofessional and inappropriate behavior was reported to the EIP, Elections Integrity Project.
Ms. Wyman, you've exceeded your time by about 30 seconds, so if you could please bring your comments to a close.
Okay, the last thing I would say is my supervisor witnessed huge Wi-Fi routers chained to the Dominion computers and printer cards. I'm very troubled about the issues concerning the Dominion voting machines. I believe that we should just continue the electronic counting machines and return to the hand counting of paper ballots to reclaim the integrity and confidence to the voters of Kern County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please, and I'll ask if you could adhere to the 2-minute time limit. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us speak. My name is Don Musser. I'm the president of the Greater Ridgecrest Republican Assembly, a newly formed group in Ridgecrest. I was an election observer during the fall recall election as well. I won't list all of the items because it would take too long that we found that were wrong. However, what I did notice is a lack of training by the personnel that are election workers, and some attitude by a couple of, very negative attitude by a couple of the lead workers in the precincts or in the polls. I've also become rather concerned about election integrity, so I sent an email to Mary Bedard to see if we could help locally in Ridgecrest, since it's so far away, help clean up the voter rolls. That was my intent. I received a reply that said they do that regularly, every quarter, I believe she said, and they did not need any help. The previous speaker apparently shows that maybe that's not exactly true. Additionally, I am concerned about the Dominion machines, and I will second the option to say, why don't we go back to hand counting of paper ballots? I think there's plenty of people that would be glad to help just to maintain the integrity of the election system here in Kern County. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Joe Chesney, and I'm a president for the Kern River Valley Republican Assembly, and I'm just here to voice what I observed when I was in Kernville. For the last 3 or 4 elections now, I haven't been on the voting roll. I got a Democrat ballot sheet sent to me, and it only had Democrats. There was no Republicans on it. It was like all you had to do was just choose one. So I got that fixed to where I was able to be a Republican voter. And then when I went down to do it, and I'm watching people in line on this thing about surrendering ballots. Kernville and the whole area is like a retirement community. There are older people here. So you got people in line with these mail-in ballots. They don't know what to do with them. I'm watching this happen, and they're like, well, you need to surrender your ballot. What do you mean surrender my ballot? Surrender my vote? No, you're just going to surrender your ballot. We're going to give you a provisional. And they're like, phew, it just takes these nice little calm people and make them a little anxious, and watching little happy people become like agitated and anxious. And so anyways, that's what my observation was. But it would be nice if one of these voting cycles I could actually be on the voting roll. That would be nice. Another thing I want to talk about is I did go down to talk to Josh. I've been through the entire elections division. I saw you call them Dominion machines, but they look like, when I worked at F-18 at China Lake, they look like just these giant Canon printers, probably with Dominion firmware put into them. And then they're all routed into a router. And I asked Josh, so do these things go online? Yeah, we can take them online, but when we do voting, we take them offline. I go, but they're not like standalones. I would think that they were all standalones and not tied into a server. So I think that the whole thing is kind of interesting, and I'm supporting also that we go back to hand count voting the way that we were prior to the introduction to the Dominion machines of 2015 for the 2016 election. We should go back to what we were doing for over 100 years. We've been doing fine with our counting. And also in 2015, there was only an 8% increase in the votes from 2012 to 2016, or 6%. And then 2016 to this last one, it was an 8%. I'm just trying to understand the justification to go to Dominion machines and spending all that money.
Thank you, Mr. Chesney.
Okay, but I think we should. I hope you all consider to go back and look like rock stars and put us back on the hand count voting. I would love to see that. And I'll vote for you. And I'll push everything on you guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You want to win again? I'm there to help you, because I tell you what, I'm watching.
Do we have any other speakers on this under public presentations? Okay, thank you. I'll just make a couple of comments. I support having Ms. Bedard come in and make a presentation to address some of the concerns. I trust that she would be able to watch the meeting and be able to hear some of the things that folks have expressed. I've seen some some folks in the public that are also concerned about this, and I've had questions about the elections office and having the registrar of voters removed from under the clerk. And I know that our council has looked into that, and I don't know if Ms. Rezan, if you want to give sort of a brief answer as far as the process is concerned, because Kern, I know, is not a county where, or rather there's about 13 counties where elections is separate, but that was under state legislation, and so I believe state legislation would be required, or a county measure that the people would have to vote on. If you're not prepared to answer now, then that's perfectly fine, but perhaps that should be added, or I'd like that to be added to the discussion, because that is a question that seems to be on a lot of people's minds, at least that have appeared here today.
Chairman Scrivener, for purposes of clarification, I can provide brief information. You are correct that there is it's a series of government codes. In the government code, first it starts with that the county clerk is an elected position. And generally, the county clerk also serves as the registrar of voters. All of that is within the government code. There is a separate piece of legislation or government code section that allows specific counties to have a separate registrar of voters elected by the people. I believe there's 13 or 14 counties, and Kern County is not in that list. In order to become a county where the registrar of voters would be independently elected, there would need
Appointed,
to
I
be
believe,
legislation.
Would the registrar of voter be independently elected or appointed?
It could be
I think it's there.
I'm sorry, it's appointed.
Thank you.
You're correct. Right. The registrar, it would allow the Board of Supervisors to appoint the registrar of voters in the same way that other county
Which is, I think,
department heads
what
are.
the request is, at least from a few of the speakers today, is that the board would appoint the ROV rather than have it be under the elected clerk. But is there also a provision where a county measure where a majority of the voters could approve such a change?
Yes. So for an elected position, let me pull that up. I was just looking at it.
And I apologize for putting
That's
you
all
on the
right.
spot here, but
Okay. So to change any county office that's required to be elected may become appointed. In order to do this, the proposal shall be presented to the voters of the county and approved by a majority of the votes cast on the proposition.
Okay, so I thought that was important, at least to get a brief report. You know, perhaps we can have more information, but just for folks that are wondering about this or are wanting to see this change, that some understanding of the process, and perhaps you already know that to be the case, but that it would require state legislation or a vote of a majority of the county voters. But just for the sake of this discussion and to maybe tee up one of the things that we could talk about in a week from now, that I wanted to just broach that briefly. So thank you. So I don't see any other speakers. The next item on our agenda is item 2, which is board member announcements or reports. Do we have any board members that have any announcements or reports? No? Okay, very good. Well, then that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda today. And our next meeting will be next week. I just wanted to get the day. So it'll be February 15th. And so without objection, we are adjourned.